Hey, this is John Reed. I'm coming to you from the ASUG annual conference / Sapphire show floor for another Ask Us Anything session. And I've got, unfortunately for you all, I've got the usual suspects. Hi, Jeff.
Hello, John. How are you? Nice to see you.
Josh Greenbaum.
Josh Greenbaum. Yes, thank you. Good to be here.
It's day 2 voice.
It's day 2.
A little
right.
huskier, a little drier.
Yeah.
A little Orlando humidity, a lot of talking.
A little too autonomous, maybe. Sorry, the snark already began.
Autonomous talking?
So just to frame it for the listeners who catch this recording later, we are just after the keynote in day 2. So we're a little bit over the halfway mark of the show, but there is still some unfolding stuff that I know I'm still chasing down. Having said that, the tradition is that ASUG Talks Jim Lichtenwalter is armed with some questions. I actually have no idea what the questions are. I think you guys took a peek. I don't like taking a peek. I want to be totally surprised. I'm worried about her.
I'm going to produce here for a moment. I'm going to give the microphone off to Chris to kick us off.
Okay, let's start it with Chris.
Okay, good morning. So in a lot of the conversations that we've been having over the last quarter, 2 quarters about AI and the need for clean data, now we're also hearing both from the market, from SAP, about how all these agents can fix this data for us and transform it and move it. What's the real story in the middle?
So what's the real story? Are you saying between agents and AI?
Yes, and in the spirit of data integrity, needing to power AI, there's this sense now that you could almost code around it, or that the agents can fix the data as part of the process in order to enable your AI. How real is it, this need to structure our data, clean our data, and maybe some of the tools that are coming out can automate pieces of this for us?
Right. So it's a classic circular problem with AI, right? You need the quality data for the AI, but how do you get to the quality data? And shouldn't AI be able to get you to the quality data? Oh, I have a lot of comments on that, but I'm not going to start. One of you is.
Well, I think so. So the answer, John's got some comments, but I just want to say, one of the things actually, Søren Ruda got about 120 seconds on stage today on the keynote to talk about some of the things that he's doing, and in particular, he talked about the data assistant that is basically a set of agents that have been put on top of an existing functionality in the tool chain, and it is targeted to making that at the implementation side, at the beginning of the project, that data quality, that data uniformity, real or as real as possible. So part of my answer is there are agents that can do some of this stuff, and that's one of the stuff it can do. But the reality is there's going to be a lot of hard work to get the data across the enterprise uniform and standardized enough that you can really optimize the use of agents. So there's no silver bullet. There's never been a silver bullet. There never will be a silver bullet. This is going to take a lot of hard work.
So when I think about this word agents, I think that the way that my mental model forms around it is you're going to have a lot of agents doing very specific, narrow tasks. And you could have agents that are repairing data. You could have agents that are filling in holes of data. You could have agents that are mining it for certain things. And so I think that this word data can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. And one of the areas that I think through is if you have an agent that is looking at a lot of data, but the data that it's looking at is not relevant to the problem you're trying to solve, then you're asking that agent to plow through things that don't mean anything. And the risk goes up that the result it returns is biased to a lot of things that don't matter. And as SAP customers, we've spent most of our careers trying to figure this word data out. What's in our systems? Does it matter? And we've been collecting a lot of data over decades. And now that we have all these agents, I don't think they necessarily make that problem go away, Chris. I think they actually are going to make it very, very real that a lot of the data that we have doesn't matter for the problem at hand. And now we've got to figure out how to really work on that. Otherwise, and especially in the world of tokens, if we think about this, that, every time these agents spin from an LLM perspective, they're consuming tokens. And if there's a lot of noise out there, we're going to be spending a lot of money as customers on result sets that don't matter. And so I think we're going to come to a very clear and concise conclusion that data is more important than ever, more relevant than ever. and we're probably the least prepared to understand how to manage all of it.
So can I give an AI data geek explanation and see how this lands? Hopefully I don't get too far in the weeds.
You got to see she's sort of nodding,
Yeah,
and
she's
then sort of not nodding.
will I lose her? I might lose the whole audience here. Anyway, the short answer is it's somewhere in the middle. It's you can expect pain reduction, but not pain-free living. Data pain remains. Okay, so AI is strongest when you're asking questions that are within its training context, right? So obviously SAP customer landscapes are not within the context of LLM. So what SAP is doing, and the reason it talks about context so much is it's pulling in that information from your environment. But it depends on how customized your environment is versus what else those agents have seen in the past. So basically, the more customized you are differently than other customers, the more screwed you are. But one thing is that they are going to be very good at the syntax of data, right? So getting data in the proper structures within files to be imported into a new system. The semantics of data are a different question entirely. So for example, I could see less data analysts, but more domain experts still being involved to say, hey, actually the agent doesn't realize, but these 3 business units are actually part of the same parent account. The agent doesn't know that, right? And so I think you're going to be able to save on some of the brute force data analytical work, but you're going to need experts who understand that domain to supervise that. And so you always have to be a little bit careful about the autonomous enterprise, right? Because there's a big old asterisk next to it. But if you can make that process less painful, I think that's still a huge win. And so I really like the announcement that SAP said, and it will be specialized agents, but it will be in SAP's context, a series of specialized agents working towards an orchestrated path, right? And so there's an orchestration agent that SAP is surfacing as an assistant, as in Joule for consultants in this case, that calls to specialized agents. Anyway, I hope that's not too geeky. Was that too geeky?
No, I think that's fine. I think it's a really good question, and probably one that many of us as SAP customers struggle with is how actually are we going to organize all these agents? I mean, when I hear in the keynote this morning that one customer had 1,000 agents already in production, there's a part of me that says that's really cool. Then there's another part of me that says, how are we going to manage thousands of agents in the future doing what we don't know? And how are we as SAP professionals going to be able to understand? And there were some answers to that, I think, this week in the Tuesday keynote and a little bit more today. But I think there's a lot of work to be done about how do we manage an environment with all these agents doing things.
And SAP is providing technology to in the form of Signavio and LeanIX to do that. But that's just the sort of the how. That's not the that's the what, not the how. It's going to take a lot of hard work to structure those 2 systems around this agentic opportunity and really do that kind of hard management work.
Hey guys, question. I think a lot of organizational designs right now, and even frankly skill sets of yesterday are no longer relevant. How do you see the SAP customer base? Should they be thinking about both, I think, their technology, like organizational design, but also upskilling or really reskilling, of their employee base to be, competitive or ready to execute in the future years with what SAP is rolling out?
Every time that we as ASUG are in the chapters, and there's 40 of them across North America, I ask the question, where are you spending the bulk majority of your time? And the answer that still comes back is most of our SAP community is spending their time keeping the existing systems operating, or they're spending their time in S4 transformation. And where they're clearly not, and when they tell me that they're spending 80% of their time doing that, that tells me that the other 20% is basically spent catching your breath, fixing whatever else is left over. There's no time to do experimentation, exploration, and just taking a moment to learn something new. So I think in the future organizational design, we have to start with something kind of more fundamental, which is just give yourself time to try out something different. Even if it doesn't end up giving you, the results you need, that process is instrumental in and of itself. And I think that we all have to go through that. I think if the organization mandates it, it becomes a task and not a journey. And I think we as SAP professionals, I've learned a ton over the last 3 to 4 months about AI because I took the time to invest my own time in it and, opened up Claude Code, tried some things out, wrote prompts, see what came back. And some of the times I was doing this and I was in the middle of it, I'm like, why am I burning all this time doing this? And am I going to get to a productive end? And eventually I did. And I've got some really cool personal agents that are helping me do things that if I hadn't invested the time, I never would have done them. And if someone had forced me to do and say, go to this training event and learn this now and now go do this, I probably would have rebelled against it. But now I'm starting to understand how these pieces work. I'm a learner by doing things. If I can do it and I can replicate it, then I get it. I won't read it in a book. And I think a lot of us work that same way. And so I think you got to have that time invested in experimentation and exploration. And as leaders, we have to encourage our teams to take that time. Otherwise, we will not progress.
This question really pushes my buttons, I think mostly in a good way. But bottom line is that when you look at skills, there's some general understanding that so-called soft skills are going to become more important, right? Pretty much everyone agrees on that. And one of the reasons is that AI kind of has if you start applying it, it has a silo busting aspect, right? And so it exposes your human imperfections inside your organizations and the people who aren't talking to each other. We just did a workshop about that yesterday, actually. But anyway, so if you haven't been talking with your colleagues and reaching beyond your cubicle, then it starts to raise the question of why you're actually there. But there's also considerable debate in terms of other skills that agents replace or do not replace. And I happen to feel strongly, for example, people say, well, expertise is a commodity. I disagree completely because it's actually the domain experts that are the only ones in your organization that can sometimes see the problems with agentic output. And so I think it's actually, you have to be very savvy about continuing to do that. And some organizations are no longer hiring a lot of junior people. That's a massive self-defeating mistake, right? You need junior folks. You just need to figure out how to engage them. And the smart companies like IBM and Amazon comes to mind offhand. There's others are still hiring juniors and they're being very clear about why they're doing it, right? And so, but one thing is AI first is a really bad way of looking at it. Jeff said it. It's about experimentation and it's about creating a culture where people can evolve and grow. And I think those that engage in ruthless headcount reduction are going to see a lot of that backfire, in my opinion. And so in a more geeky sense, you need a kind of a skills ontology inside your organization that thinks about how to develop skills. And obviously you can go talk with the success factors people about that. And they will be glad to talk to you about how brilliantly success factors will do that for you. But there's other options as well, right? But really it's about helping individuals to really think through how they can advance their skills inside your organization and exposing those skills so you can develop them.
As I'm thinking about the answers coming out of this question, we are very good as IT professionals at thinking about other people's processes and pointing out weaknesses and failures and areas for opportunity. How about we start with what is our own personal workflow? What do we do every day in our jobs? Are the things that we do value added or not value added? And if they are repetitive, how might we use these tools to improve our personal workflow versus making an opinion about someone else's workflow? And I think if you start there, it's a healthy way to start entering into some of these tools and saying, if I can do this for me, I know I can be more credible at doing it for others.
All right, I'm going to take a completely different tack. To me, one of the questions that you have to sort of ask yourself, if I understood your question right, is where is the forward thinking going on in my organization, and how do I attach myself to it? And I'll add that if you're in an organization where there isn't someone or some part of your organization, a strategy group, whatever, an individual who's thinking about the future and planning for the future, if you're not in that kind of organization, get another job. But if you are and you're in IT and don't have a seat at the table, that's a problem you need to do everything in your power to resolve. Because at the end of the day, and I'm going to slightly differ from my colleagues here, if all you're doing is innovating in the IT domain and trying to upskill your IT staff and not looking at where is this company going to go, what's the next thing that's happening, what's the next big thing, and how do I become part of it and anticipate it and bring my sense of expertise into it, you're going to miss out. And your company's going to miss out. So I'm going to say slightly differently, you need to sort of expand your domain a little bit. If you're not in the room when the strategy is starting to be spelled out. You got to do it.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good. So, if you had a magic wand, like a blank check, and you could change one thing about our SAP ecosystem today that's going to help move the needle towards the autonomous enterprise, what would that be?
Okay, I'll give you my quick answer to that because I've been stumping for this for years. I would elevate the work of small SAP partners to tremendous visibility for customers. And that includes putting them on the keynote stage, yes, at Sapphire, so that customers can be aware that in this fast-changing world, they need to open their minds to different kinds of partners and solutions. And I would totally showcase that. And I've been trying to get SAP for years to do it. And then again and again, we see the usual big SI suspects on stage, which I think presents such a limiting view of what's actually happening in the ecosystem in terms of innovation that makes a difference to customers.
All right, it's a magic wand. It's not a little thing we can rub and a genie pops out and you get 3 wishes. I only get one. I would like magically to appear in every large and small organization a executive vice president of silo busting office with extreme authority and budget to kick the hell out of those silos and start really mandating and following through on developing end-to-end processes and developing the value and the priority for them. That's my dream. And while we're at it, I want SAP to appoint a similar person to stop. Because even yesterday, if you saw in the keynote, even if we're doing silo busting, we're still talking about silos. There's still 5 industries. There's still this thing called CX. There's still this thing called supply chain. There's still this thing called HCM. And to be really honest, if you're still thinking that those are 3 separate domains instead of parts of the same end-to-end process, you're missing the boat. So silo busting, that's mine.
My magic wand would be that instead of, when we look at the ASUG Pulse survey, there's still a large percentage of the customer base that is moving through an S4 transformation. I'd like to see my world would be 95% of the customer base has concluded that transformation and is moving on to the next phase of getting value from their S4 investments and being done. Because I think that as I look out over the speed of AI, those of us who are still in the process of transformation have a hard time thinking about how I'm going to leverage all this AI capability. Because while that sounds great, I still have X percentage of my of my processes and my system landscapes to move. And I'd like to use AI, but I'm busy doing other things. So if we can get those other things out of the way, we can get to what I think is really the important conversation, which is a massive amount of business transformation that is a potential through the AI lens.
I thought we were supposed to get 3 wishes, so I'm a little disappointed.
I think it was 1, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was 1.
No,
It was 1.
but I mean traditionally in the way the fairy tales go, you get 3.
Well, then that's going to be a 45-minute conversation.
You're so right. Jim, what you got?
I would just like to point out that question was also submitted in the next one I was going to ask. So thank you for submitting and coming here. I appreciate that. Jeff, I have one for you that was submitted by someone, but I'm going to open it up to Josh and John. What do you wish that SAP, its vendors, and its partners understood about what ASUG members need the most?
Yeah, I think one of the classic challenges for most of the SAP employee base, and I don't mean this in a bad way, is most of them have never actually used the software to achieve business transformation. They can talk about it, right? And I think this is true for most software companies. They understand how to manufacture the software. They've never been asked to use it. So I think you learn a tremendous amount about the software when you actually have to use it to achieve an outcome that you talk about on a keynote stage, right? And so I think there's a tremendous opportunity, and what I would hope for, and that in some of the partners you see a slightly better outcome because they're actually on the ground with the customer trying to do it. And we could get into a conversation about skills alignment and some of that, but generally speaking, from an SAP perspective, I'd like to see them walk in the shoes of the customer more and really understand the pain points and how just saying new words on a keynote stage, it actually takes a long time for those terms and those concepts to seek into the customer domain to really understand. And we don't give enough time to say, hey, when we're going to introduce these new themes or these concepts, we're going to stick with it for the next 1 to 2 years so that people really understand it. We just drop them and we move on. And most of the time, the customer's like, what did that mean? And go investigate it. We just kind of go and put our heads back in the sand.
Right on. Okay, here's this is real. Now it's real magic wand. I want SAP to understand that we don't want you to keep changing product names and product direction every 45 minutes and ask us to do something completely new when we just finally got budget to do the last thing you asked us to do. And that's sort of a riff on what you just said.
Have you checked out Joule Work?
Joule Work. Have you
Or
checked?
just slapping the word autonomous in front of everything?
Fiori, anyone? I mean, yeah. So that would be the one thing. I think the partners understand it much better than SAP, but SAP really just thinks that, yeah, we can just get up and change strategy, and sure, they'll march. The customers are going to march just happily down that new primrose path.
And just a real quick add, I think that, and this is just not true of SAP, but vendors tend to get very, very excited internally about their ideas and sometimes forget that they're at their best when they're co-innovating from the start. So just to give you a recent example, the SAP API policy brouhaha, had they really sense tested that with partners, it would have gone so much better for them instead of the LinkedIn viral carnival that's been taking place for the last week. So really always starting with that co-innovation mindset. And I think ASUG can play a crucial role in all of that by helping to bringing customers and partners directly to SAP around the topics.
One more add to that is another fantasy of mine is that SAP creates something called the Office of the Customer Advocate or the Office of the Customer Ombudsman. And just as John said, something like that, let's have a new API policy. I mean, they should be using ASUG for that, quite frankly, and they should continue to that. But before they even get to the point where they're going to be stupid in public, they should try to stop themselves by asking someone to.
Well, and we talked with your friends in the German user group last night, and you guys and DSAG ended up influencing the FAQ, the improved communications that now happened, right? But that should have ideally happened before, not later. Anyway.
Understanding what you've all been talking about, realistically, for an average SAP user company who doesn't have all the money in the world, how long do you think the timeline would really be to get to this autonomous state?
Well, I think there's potentially a question that precedes that, which is what exactly is the definition of autonomous? And I'm not sure that I'm clear yet on what that is and what that word really means. And how would you define low autonomous, mid autonomous, high autonomous, right? I don't know. I think we are at a point in time where we are just getting comfortable with these agents that we're talking about. And that has happened not over the last year, but maybe potentially, John and Josh, over the last 90 to 120 days. We just recently have seen with some of the latest releases of the models out of Anthropic and OpenAI, a massive sea change in the capability of these agents that didn't exist 9 months ago or even 6 months ago. So I'm still trying to come to terms with what we might want these agents to do and how we might govern them before I even get to what to me is a more complicated or comprehensive conversation around autonomous, right? Because autonomous says to me, just let something happen in its own way. And I'm not sure I'm at a point right now with agents where I would trust them to just do their thing. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I'm like...
Well, no. Agents are... We're talking about LLM-based agents, which is a probabilistic framework, and there's only so much you can automate in a probabilistic context because there's going to be edge cases and problems. And when I think about where I want companies to be, I don't think about the autonomous enterprise. I'm not trying to criticize SAP here, but in general, I don't find that a very empowering frame because I don't see where the humans fit into that discussion. And I don't think that's where this technology is honestly going. But I think what you could think about is, could we reach a point where we've really automated a lot of the grinding admin that prevents us from doing the good things with customers, the good things that we like about our jobs, the way we make a difference, the way we solve the more difficult problems, our creative solutioning. Like, can we free ourselves up for more of that? And across every domain, you'll find that that's been the aspiration for the longest time. And different waves of automation and technology have helped us get a little closer, but we're still trying to get there, right? And so I would just say that when I interview customers across all kinds of enterprise software products, the ones that benefit the most from AI in a scaled sense of way, they already have their act together. And you heard that on the keynote stage yesterday where they talk so much about the foundations need to be in place first. And so I would encourage customers not to think about autonomy right off the bat, but think about how can we essentially be more responsive to the difficult global markets we face? How can we respond more quickly to the changes? How can we adapt faster when we have problems? And how do we create an architecture that does that? And I think what you'll find when you step back is that you'll find things like cloud-based software is often better. You'll find things like less spaghetti of legacy systems, but you're also going to find problems in your people operations, in your processes, and maybe a Signavio can help with that. So I think the cruel truth about AI is that at scale, it helps the companies that are already kicking butt more than the companies that are struggling.
I have a very quick answer. If you're a supply chain, if supply chain is essential to you, rest assured you will never have an autonomous supply chain, because that is beyond, particularly if you're in a regulated industry, never. I just guaranteed. And in fact, to clarify that, there was on day zero, John and I were part of an analyst group, and there was a customer talking about their supply chain, agentic supply chain functionality, and I just asked point blank that question. Is there a point in which you would ever let this run autonomously? Absolutely not, was the answer. And they're in a regulated industry. But to what John said, let me just put it in a different wrapper. The best thing you can do with AI is take the machine out of the human. And thinking that way as your goal is a way to look at how can we make the human more effective and, frankly, maybe have a better job as well. But this full autonomy stuff, no thank you.
Well, one of the things that I think about in this progression is how much time are we spending working on and figuring out all the how things, how we do something. How often are we just being tripped up by, hey, that job didn't run correctly, that didn't happen overnight, that report's wrong, this isn't working, all those how things. And I think what AI is going to do is solve those how things for us in a much more efficient and expeditious way, which is amazing. And then what it's going to start to reveal is where I think we haven't been as effective as a community is why are we doing these things? What's the why behind it? So if I don't have to worry as much anymore about how a program executes and how it runs and how it does this or that, and now I'm saying, why are we even doing that to begin with? That is a much harder question to answer. And so I find even in my own AI journey, I'm not worried so much more about how to write a program or how to write a piece of code. AI is going to do that really well. Why am I even doing that? What's the business process I actually want to achieve? What is the business outcome I'm trying to get at? And I think one of the interesting things we're going to discover collectively as a community is we don't know. We've been doing some of this stuff for so long, we've forgotten the why behind it. And now that we can get all this other noise out, we're going to go, oh, wait a minute, that why does not make sense. And fixing that is hard.
What you got, Jim?
I have one related to this question that we just asked from a customer that's at a crossroads that actually also pertains to one of the announcements from yesterday. This customer writes, we're not ready to pull the trigger on a RISE implementation, but we're getting a lot of pressure from our board to do something with AI, even though we're still on ECC. Is there a way we can work with SAP, or do we need to look at a third-party provider?
Oh boy, wow! We've been having a lot of conversation with SAP about this of late. My goal for SAP is that they would work with customers like that, regardless of where they stand on RISE, and quote unquote start developing conversations around data and AI right away, because AI and data is a very sort of iterative process. So why wouldn't you want to just get started now? And what we found is that the SAP made a big change when this Sapphire, when they've now said that if you commit forward to RISE in the future, and then you can start working with us now using Joule. But if you don't want to do that yet, I think you have to look at all your options. One of you can do some stuff through BTP. So that's one possibility. But I think SAP hasn't totally answered that question for customers. So it's a really appropriate question. And I think SAP needs, frankly, a little better answer to that question.
I think of the ECC AI conversation is a little bit of I want to have my cake and I want to eat it too. And the challenge that I think we're going to run into as a customer community is our ECC environments are built on a lot of customization, a lot of things that we've just pulled through for all these years. And just assuming you can put a layer of AI over that and kind of smooth it over, it may get you a little bit of a ways down the road, but it's not going to get you to the same endpoint destination that a lot of your competitors are at, or those who have made the push forward to RISE and other more modern architectures. I think that's where the problem is going to exist, is you can buy yourself some time, but you're not going to fix the problem. I don't think you get where you need to be by maintaining yourself on a legacy ECC platform. I'd love there to be another answer to that question, but I just don't think there is. And I don't think we get to success by holding on to all of these old systems that we're continuing to run. It comes back to that 80% problem again. If I'm running ECC and most of my team is spent keeping the lights on all day long, I can't innovate, I can't learn, I can't do these things. I think RISE, for all the good reasons and bad reasons, get all this stuff out of your environments, let someone else run it so you can focus on the things you need to do to drive business outcomes.
But as you said a minute ago, I think it's really important to innovate, to spend some time innovating. And if the only way to do that is to set up a little team to do that, even though you're stuck in the ECC past, you still should be able to start thinking about how some of this agentic AI can impact your company, and you should be exploring that. And I think SAP should make that abundantly easy for these customers. Some of them are just stuck. They can't move as fast as they'd like.
And I would say that in some ways your answer, while correct, is a little idealistic, because there's a ton of vendors that are going to go into those customers and sell them on AI. I could rattle off some of the names if people want to hear them. Anthropic and Palantir come to mind. But anyway, SAP needs good answers to how we can get started now. But you're right. In the end, your ECC is going to have to change, and no one's better than you at getting customers to think about that, because I just listened to a podcast about that on ASOC Talks.
Yeah, again, I think you can do whatever you want to do with your existing ECC environment. If you want to put AI over it and you want to go hire a bunch of partners to do that, they will do that for you. I just worry that outcome is going to be relevant for a short period of time, and you're going to buy yourself a little bit of time and then find yourself at the same end of the road.
But the point is some customers do need to buy some time for whatever reason. They have merger and acquisition scenarios going on, or they're trying to focus on some customer-facing app or whatever. And in the meantime, if I'm SAP, I want an answer to that customer that isn't quite ready.
From a personal productivity perspective, how do you use AI all day, and what particular tools do you use, and how do you stay current?
I could start with that one. So, and this has taken some time to pull off, and that was part of my answer earlier, that you've got to invest some time to do this and learn. I have a series of agents that run on my behalf. One every night, grabs all my meetings for the next day, drops them into Apple Notes in a very specific format. It also goes out into Teams, and if it's a meeting that meets certain criteria, it turns on the recording flag so that it gets recorded. In that Apple Notes, it has to-dos and follow-ups. So while I'm having the conversation, I can type in to-dos and follow-ups. At about 6 p.m. every night, a second agent picks up all of those Apple Notes. And I use Apple Notes because I'm on a Mac platform, and it's just easier for me because I can see them across all my devices. You could use OneNote, you could use whatever. It picks up all those meeting notes for the day, looks at any of the transcripts. If I say send an email to so-and-so and follow up, it drops all of that in my drafts Outlook folder. So everything's ready to go. And it does a surprisingly good job at providing meeting follow-ups without me touching anything. And especially if it has access to the transcripts of the conversation, it does a really nice job of making sure that I've captured the follow-ups. And I've historically been very bad at meeting follow-up. It's not something I enjoy doing. It has made me do that much better, because the horrible task of sitting down and writing an email has been taken away from me, and I can just work on the outcome. It does not press send, however.
Well, I was smiling partially because I was remembering a friend of mine who set up an OpenClaw server, and so he decided to schedule a meeting for us using his agent, and the agent totally screwed up the meeting, and it was at the wrong time and didn't appear in my calendar right. and he ended up having to do it manually by himself like an hour later. So I think sometimes we get a little bit ahead of ourselves with some of these things, but also I think it's really good to kind of also think that it's not just about LLM agents. Like AI has a lot of different impacts on our lives, including sort of the algorithmic stuff that really shapes how we consume content, including probably this podcast. So for example, like in my own research on AI, the YouTube algorithm that I've trained on my content is actually incredibly important to me because it constantly surfaces new material around cutting edge research that I actually can't find anywhere else. But I know that sounds weird, but that's where I get some of that. And so that's huge for me, but it's not an agent, right? And I have a whole lot of stuff I do with machine language transcriptions for my work. So there's like different little pieces that I incorporate. But one thing I will say is I totally suck at slides, and I kept trying AI for slides, right? And every single AI slide thing was terrible. And then I found one that was really good, and I used it actually for an ASUG presentation, and I got all these compliments on my slides. I've never gotten a compliment on a slide deck in my entire friggin' life. My slides are just so bad, and I was like, oh my God, and it was actually this tool called Gamma. I'll give them a plug since I got a compliment. I was like, wow, people like my slides now. This is pretty cool because I'm pretty good at writing, but like everyone, we have certain mediums where we're good and where we're not. And one of the things I like about AI is helping us a little bit in the mediums where we're not as good.
All right. I'm going to pass on that because I want to ask Jeff a question. And I think we're running low on time.
Last question.
So we're starting to see and hear hints that SAP wants to start to move towards a value-based pricing model and pricing based on outcomes and value, and not pricing in what the rest of us would see it as a predictable way. This is already starting to happen with how the credits are working out in the agentic world. But I'm just wondering, as a community leader, I mean, I have my own opinions, but do we as a user community want to do gain sharing with our software vendors? Is that a good way for us to move forward? Loaded question.
Yeah, I think that's a very complicated question. I think there's some pieces when you say, if I can tie the expense to the outcome, maybe it's better for me as a customer, to hold the software vendor, software partner accountable for the outcome I'm trying to achieve. So maybe you could see an argument that there's some gain sharing occurring because you've given them more risk, and therefore you're willing to give them, some form of compensation for that risk that they're taking. The flip side of that argument, Josh, is metering that is incredibly hard. And sometimes it's just easier to pay for tokens than it is to figure out how you would do it. To me, even when you look at like some of the services contracts that we've entered into as IT leaders, right? Whenever you try a gain share agreement with a vendor, with a partner, I'll give you this if you do that. It never really ends that well. It sounds really good on the setup, and the execution, it gets super, super messy.
Defining the outcome is the trick.
Well, defining the outcome and then measuring it and saying, did I get there, right? And the problem I have with that is if you're going to transfer risk to a third party to do something for you, the odds are the pricing for that risk is going to go up, right? I mean, they're going to want to make sure that they don't get left holding all of the outcome of that. So the pricing for it actually goes further up than if you just entered into a regular services contract.
If we had more time, I would share the arguments and discussions we have with SAP on AI pricing. I think the fascinating thing that all vendors are struggling with is that consumption and outcomes are not the same. So SAP is shifting to more consumption-based pricing, but that doesn't guarantee outcomes. I think it's a fascinating conversation. For those that are listening to this podcast afterwards, you missed the low-level comedy of three of us trying to share two mics, but the audience sure got to enjoy that. And
good conversation as always.
Yeah, and also as we were talking, someone I hadn't seen in like 7 years who made a real difference in my career walked by, and that was such a cool moment, and I think that's like the thing that I would want to say about why we come here, and I hope all of you have those experiences this week because that's frankly why I'm here.